Never let the narcissist mess with everything in your life, including your living conditions. Your home should be a safe haven. Keep it clean and organized. However, narcissistic abuse victims find it hard to keep up with their household chores. The abuse doesn't just ruin their mind and emotions, it can also lead to a chaotic house. Today, we're going to dive into the 10 reasons why that happens and how the stress and confusion from narcissistic abuse can lead to a messy home. Are you ready for number 1? Narcissistic abuse can lead to perfectionism. Narcissistic abuse often makes you feel like nothing you do is ever good enough, which can lead to perfectionism. Abusers constantly criticize, so you start to fear that even if you try to clean, it won't meet their impossible standards. As Dr. Carol McBride, a psychologist who works with abuse survivors, says, perfectionism can paralyze people into inaction because they fear failure. So instead of just getting started, you might avoid it altogether, worried that it won't be perfect or that you'll be criticized no matter what. It's a defense mechanism to protect yourself from more emotional harm. Listen closely. To overcome the perfectionism triggered by narcissistic abuse, start by setting small, manageable goals and focusing on progress rather than perfection. Remind yourself that imperfection is okay and a natural part of growth. Let's talk about number 2. Narcissistic abuse causes emotional turmoil. When you're dealing with narcissistic abuse, your mind is stuck in emotional survival mode. It's like your brain is constantly on high alert, trying to navigate all the manipulation, criticism, and gaslighting. In this state, simple things like cleaning or organizing become way less important because your energy is spent just trying to stay emotionally stable. As Dr. Sherry Steins, a therapist who specializes in toxic relationships, says, when you're in survival mode, your brain doesn't have the capacity to focus on tasks like cleaning. So it's no surprise that your living space can end up reflecting the chaos you're feeling inside. Let's move on to number 3. Narcissistic abuse messes with the victim's time management skills. When you're dealing with narcissistic abuse, it can completely throw off your time management. You end up spending so much energy and time dealing with the abuser's constant demands, manipulation, or drama that there's little left for anything else like cleaning or organizing. Therapist Shannon Thomas explains, narcissistic abuse keeps victims in a cycle of distraction, leaving little time for self-care or maintaining a home. You're too busy putting out emotional fires to focus on tidying up, and before you know it, things get messy. It's not laziness, it's survival. Take note of this. To overcome the time management issues caused by narcissistic abuse, prioritize setting clear boundaries and scheduling dedicated time for self-care and organization, ensuring you reclaim control over your time and space. Now, let's continue to number 4. Narcissistic abuse causes constant anxiety. When you're caught up in narcissistic abuse, your anxiety is on a perpetual roller coaster, and it's hard to relax enough to do anything, let alone tackle chores. It's like trying to clean your house during a thunderstorm. Every noise and distraction is amplified, making it nearly impossible to focus. As therapist Dr. Karen Horney once said, anxiety is the dizziness of freedom, and right now, freedom to clean feels like a distant dream. So if your living space looks like a disaster zone, it's not because you're a neat freak slacker, it's because you're too busy juggling anxiety to actually get around to organizing that clutter. You shouldn't miss number 5. Narcissistic abuse gives victims emotional triggers on certain objects at home. Narcissistic abuse can turn everyday objects in your home into emotional triggers. It makes them feel like landmines that provoke negative feelings and make cleaning seem overwhelming. As Dr. Sherry Campbell explains, this makes it difficult to manage your space healthily because the clutter becomes a way to cope with the emotional pain associated with those items. Consider this helpful tip. To overcome the emotional triggers caused by certain objects in your home, gradually address and sort these items with a focus on self-compassion, possibly with the support of a therapist to reclaim your space and reduce their emotional impact. Are you still up for number 6? Narcissistic abuse steals victims' pride in their space. When you're dealing with narcissistic abuse, it's like your pride in your space gets taken away. The constant criticism and manipulation can make you feel like your home isn't worth taking care of. It's hard to feel proud of your space when someone's always tearing you down. As Dr. Ramani Durvasula, a psychologist who specializes in narcissism, explains, narcissistic abuse erodes your self-esteem and sense of self-worth, making it difficult to take pride in your environment. So don't be surprised if keeping your place tidy feels like a lost cause. It's not just about cleanliness, it's about feeling like your space matters. Let's keep it moving to number 7. Narcissistic abuse conditions victims to neglect their needs. When you're caught up in narcissistic abuse, you can get conditioned to ignore your own needs, and that includes keeping your living space in order. The constant focus on the abuser's demands and criticisms makes you forget to take care of yourself and your environment. Dr. Karen C. McClintock, a therapist who understands the impacts of abuse, says, abuse conditions people to prioritize the abuser's needs over their own, leading to neglect of self-care and surroundings. So it's not just about being messy, it's a side effect of being trained to put yourself last. Here comes number 8. Narcissistic abuse robs victims of their motivation in everything. When you're dealing with narcissistic abuse, it's like having a motivation thief sneaking around your life. And guess what? Cleaning is one of its favorite targets. After surviving the emotional battering, you're so drained that the thought of scrubbing a sink feels so overwhelming. As psychologist Dr. Martin Seligman puts it, when we experience learned helplessness, we lose our ability to motivate ourselves. So if your living space looks like a tornado hit it, it's not that you're lazy, it's that your motivation is too busy recovering from emotional bruises to bother with dusting off those shelves. Moving on to number 9. Narcissistic abuse deprives victims of their privacy. When you're living under the shadow of narcissistic abuse, your personal space gets trampled on like it's a doormat. Narcissists have this delightful habit of invading every corner of your life, making you feel like your home is more of a public park than a private sanctuary. So if your place is a mess, it's not just because you've given up. It's because after having your privacy shredded, cleaning feels like a pointless gesture. As Dr. Sherry Campbell puts it, when your privacy is invaded, it's hard to feel that maintaining your space matters. So don't be surprised if tidying up seems like a lost cause when your sense of personal space has been completely overrun. Finally, we're down to number 10. Narcissistic abuse causes victims to be in a state of denial. When you're caught in narcissistic abuse, you might end up in a state of denial. Not just about how you're feeling, but also about the mess around you. You might convince yourself that the clutter or disorganization isn't a big deal because it feels easier than facing the full impact of the abuse. Dr. Jennifer Freyd, a psychologist who studies trauma and abuse, explains, denial is a common coping mechanism that helps people manage overwhelming emotions and situations. So if you're ignoring the mess, it's often a way to shield yourself from the deeper pain and chaos caused by the abuse. Let me teach you something. To overcome denial about the mess caused by narcissistic abuse, gently confront the reality of your situation by setting small, achievable goals to address the clutter while seeking support to process and heal from the underlying trauma. Narcissistic abuse isn't just a mental and emotional battle. It can turn your living space into a cluttered mess too. When you're constantly dealing with manipulation and control, it's no wonder your environment might start reflecting that chaos. But recognizing this pattern is the first step toward reclaiming your space and your peace of mind. By understanding the connection between abuse and messy living conditions, you can start taking steps to tidy up both your home and your life. Remember, it's all about taking it one step at a time,